Welcome, YouTubers, to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In today's video, I'm going to be working out 16 practice test questions that should closely mirror what you should expect to see in the arithmetic reasoning subtest of both the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, that is the ASVAB, as well as the pre-screening Internet Delivered Computer Adaptive Test, that is the PiCAT. As always, in order to get the most out of this video, you'll want to pause the video after I read a practice test question, attempt to work out the question on your own, and then resume playing the video to check your solution. As a reminder, on the actual ASVAB and PiCAT, you will not be permitted to use a reference sheet or a calculator, so as you work your way through these practice test questions, try not to use either of those resources. Finally, I want to say this. I strongly believe that there's no need for you to spend any money on expensive test prep, such as online boot camps or tutoring, given that I recently put together a free math bootcamp playlist for you. I'll put a link to my math bootcamp playlist in the description of this video. But in short, I want to mention this. It has more than 500 practice test questions. And if you work through it from start to finish, you will be exceptionally well prepared for both the ASVAB and PiCAT. So with all those things being said, let's go ahead and get started with this practice test. All right, so this first question says, there are 9 red and 11 blue marbles in the bag. If you reach in the bag and randomly take one marble, what is the probability of getting a blue marble? So to figure that probability out, we're going to do this. The probability of getting a blue marble is equal to the number of blue marbles in the bag. So how many blue marbles are in the bag? There are 11 blue marbles in the bag, divided by the total number of marbles in the bag. Well, how many marbles are in the bag in total? We have 9 red and 11 blue. And by doing this math very quickly, we'll know what your probability of getting a blue marble is. So this becomes 11 divided by 9 plus 11 is 20. And now we clearly have to convert this fraction into a decimal and ultimately into a percent. There are two ways you can go about doing this. The easiest way is to do this long division. That is to say, instead of reading this as 11 over 20, we're going to read it as 11 divided by 20. And by performing this long division, we'll convert this fraction into a decimal. By multiplying a decimal by 100, you'll convert a fraction or a decimal into a percent. So this is the first thing we have to do. 20 doesn't go into 11, so we have to add a decimal, and I'm going to add a couple of 0 placeholders. Once I add that decimal, I'm going to bring up that decimal into my answer. And of course, since 20 did not go into 11, I'm going to put a 0 here to indicate that it did not. Now the question is, how many times does 20 go into 110 without going over? Well, 20 times 6 would be 120, which is too big. So this has to be 5. 20 times 5, of course, is 100. 110 minus 100 is simply 10. Now we're going to drop down this 0. How many times does 20 go into 100 without going over? Of course, that is going to be 5 times, given that 5 times 20 is exactly 100. 100 minus 100 is 0. So 11 over 20 expressed as a decimal is 0.55. In order to convert a decimal to a percent, we simply multiply it by 100. And you do not have to work this out off to the side. You should realize that when you multiply a decimal by a power of 10, including 10, 100, 1000, and so on, you simply take that decimal and you shift it to the right according to how many zeros there are in your power of 10. In 100, there are 2 zeros. So we're going to take our decimal and 0.55 and shift it 2 times to the right. In other words, 0.55 expressed as a percent is 55%, which is answer choice C. All right, so number 2 says, if the perimeter of a square volleyball court is 32 feet, what is the area of the volleyball court? So in this case, since we know we're talking about a volleyball court that is in the shape of a square, let's quickly make a square for reference. And you should know that in squares, all the sides are equal. According to this problem, we know our volleyball court has a perimeter of 32 feet. And given that, we want to find out what its area is. Well, how do you find the area of a square? That's one of the formulas you have to know for this test. To find the area of a square, it's always side times side. So in this case, we're given the perimeter and we have to figure out what its area is. Of course, you should realize that the key to doing that is to figure out what the side length of this square is. And you might be saying, how am I going to do that? Well, how do you find the perimeter of a square? To find the perimeter of a square, you simply add up all of its sides. Let's say this side's S. That means this side's S, and this side's S. So to find its perimeter, you do S plus S plus S plus S. Of course, that's simply 4S, since we have four sides that are all equal. And in this case, we know our perimeter is 32. So we can actually substitute that in right here to make this 32 equals 4S. And by dividing both sides by 4, we'll know what the side length of our square is. Of course, this crosses out, leaving you with S on this side. 32 divided by 4 is 8. So in other words, we have a square volleyball court, and all of its sides are 8 feet long. So given that, we can now find its area. Again, we know its side lengths are 8, so this is going to be 8 times 8. You should know that 8 times 8 is 64. So this square volleyball court that has a perimeter of 32 feet has an area of 64 square feet, which is answer choice C. Number 3, as you can see, says in September, your lease for your apartment will renew. If you paid $1,650 a month in rent and your landlord decides to increase your rent by 2.8%, what will your new rent be per month? All right, so for this one, we simply have to figure out what 2.8% of 1650 is, and then we'll add that to 1650. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take 1650 and we're going to multiply it by 2.8%. Well, we can't multiply this by something with a percentage sign. So what we're going to do is we're going to express 2.8% in decimal form. And in decimal form, that's 0.028. In other words, we're going to take 1650. We're going to multiply it by 0.028. Now, in order to make this math a little bit easier, we want to get rid of this decimal. And to do that, we're going to shift it 1, 2, 3 times to the right. And in doing so, this becomes 1650 times 28, albeit with 3 decimals to shift back into the left at the end when we're done. So we shifted the decimal to the right here. At the end, we'll shift it to the left. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. 0 times 8 is 0. 5 times 8 is 40, so bring down a 0, carry a 4. 6 times 8 is 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, so bring down a 2, carry a 5. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 5, that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right, before we start multiplication with this 2, we have to bring in a 0 placeholder. 2 times 0 is 0. 5 times 2 is 10, so bring down a 0, carry a 1. 6 times 2 is 12 plus 1 is 13, carry a 1. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. Let's add these together. 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. 2 plus 0 is 2. 3 plus 3 is 6. 1 plus 3 is 4. Bring in our 3 decimal places, 1, 2, 3. All right, so you can see that 2.8% of 1650 is 4620. So we're going to have to add that to 1650 now. So that's going to be 1650 plus 4620. If it's helpful, you can add a decimal here and 2 0 placeholders. 0 plus 0 is 0. 2 plus 0 is 0. Bring down our decimal in place. 0 plus 6 is 6. 5 plus 4 is 9. 6 plus nothing is 6. 1 plus nothing is 1. So your new rent in this case is going to be $1696.20, which you can see is answer choice C. All right, so number 4 says, if the population of a certain city increased by 12% in 2 years, The new population is what percent of the old population. So for a question like this, you have to be able to think outside the box. More specifically, you have to be able to say this. We had the old population of the city. We know the population increased by 12% to get its current population. That said, we're not given any values for the population of this city. So I'm going to say that its old population was 100 people. And I picked that number out of thin air, but I also picked it strategically because I know I'm going to be adding uh, 12% to 100. And using 100 makes that math very easy to do. 12% of 100 is simply 12. So I knew the population grew by 12 people to make its current population 100 plus 12 are 112. Now that we have that information, we can answer this part of the question. The new population is what percent of the old population? That's going to look like this: 112 divided by 100. And you might be saying to yourself, well, this math's not easy to do. Why did you pick 100? Well, again, when you multiply by 100, as you've seen in this video already, you shift your decimal to the right 2 times. In this case, we're dividing by 100, and our decimal in 112 is right here. So when we divide by 100, we're going to shift its decimal according to how many zeros there are in 100. Since there are 2 zeros in 100, we're going to shift its decimal 2 times. So in other words, 112 divided by 100 is 1.12. And you should know that that is equivalent to 112%. All right, so the correct answer to this one is C. Again, by picking the number 100, you make this math very easy to do. You don't have to multiply things out or divide anything out because, again, 100 is very, very easy to do. Number 5 says a pizza pie was cut into 8 equal pieces. A person who eats 1/2 of one piece eats what fraction of the total pizza? All right, so we know a pizza more often than not is in the shape of a circle. And according to this problem, our pizza was cut into 8 equal pieces. So let's go ahead and do that. That's in half, that's in quarters, that's in sixths, and that's in eighths. So each of these slices of pizza is 1/8 of the total pizza. And according to the question, we want to know what fraction of the total pizza someone eats when they eat half of one slice. So we're going to have to figure out what half of one of these slices is. Well, to do that, we're simply going to take 1/8 and we're going to take half of that. So we're going to multiply it by 1/2. Now we're just multiplying two fractions. To multiply two fractions, you just multiply straight across. In other words, this becomes 1 times 1 over 8 times 2. 1 times 1 is 1, 8 times 2 is 16. So a person who eats 1/2 of one of these 1/8 slices of pizza eats the 1/16 of the total pizza. All right, so number 6 says, how many feet of wire fence are necessary to enclose a garden, which is in the shape of a square and has an area of 64 square feet? So since we know we're working with a garden that's in the shape of a square, let's quickly make a square for reference. And as I mentioned in this video already, one property of squares that you have to know is the fact that all of the sides in a square are equal. In other words, this side's equal to that side's equal to that side, and that side's equal to that side. In this case, we were told that our square has an area of 64 square feet. And in light of that, we want to know how many feet of wire fence are necessary to enclose this garden. Well, to figure out how many feet of wire fence we're going to need to enclose this garden, we're going to have to figure out what this length is, plus this length is, plus this length is, plus this length is. In other words, we are finding the perimeter of this square garden. And you should know that to find the perimeter of any polygon, including squares, you simply add up all of its sides. So in other words, If I represent this side length with the letter variable s, that means this side's s, and this side's s. So to find its perimeter, it's s plus s plus s plus s. All right, so we know the formula to find the perimeter. We're given the area of this square garden. How are we going to find s given its area? Well, to find the area of a square, it's always side squared. We know its area is 64, so we'll plug in 64 for area. To get s by itself, we'll take the square root of both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with just s on this side. Square root of 64 is 8. So we know that s in this case is 8 feet. And because of that, we can simply plug that into our formula. Again, we know all these s's are 8 feet. So this becomes 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8. This is 8 plus 8 is 16. Plus 8 is 24 plus 8 is 32. So in other words, it's going to take 32 feet of wire to enclose this square garden. And we know the correct answer choice is A. All right, so number 7 says a security guard gets paid $12 per hour to patrol the mall at night. If he worked from 12 a.m. to 3:40 a.m. on Saturday, then how much did he earn for that Saturday? So the first thing you have to figure out is how long he worked on Saturday. And it says right here he worked from 12 a.m. to 3:40 a.m. You should be able to tell without having to do anything whatsoever that he worked for a total of 3 hours and 40 minutes. All right, to figure out how much he earned for those 3 hours is pretty easy. Again, he makes $12 per hour. If he worked for 3 hours, that's going to be 12 times 3 or $36. All right, so now we have to figure out how much for his 40 minutes of work. Well, in 1 hour, and he gets paid hourly, there are 60 minutes. So I'm going to write this as he worked 40 minutes of 60 minutes. We can reduce this now by crossing out these zeros. So he worked 4/6 of an hour. And we can reduce this further by a common factor of 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So he worked 2/3 of an hour. All right, so to find out what his hourly rate for doing 2/3 of an hour's worth of work, we're going to take 12, we're going to multiply it by 2/3. Of course, we're multiplying a whole number, notably 12, by a fraction, notably 2/3. To make this math a little bit easier, we can write 12 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Now, when you multiply two fractions, you just multiply straight across. In other words, this becomes 12 times 2 over 1 times 3. 12 times 2 is 24. 1 times 3 is 3. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So he made $8 for his work that he did for 2/3 of an hour. So now we just have to add those together. We have 36 plus 8. 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 0 is 0. Drop down your decimal in place. 6 plus 8 is going to be 14, carry a 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. So in total, for those 3 hours and 40 minutes that he worked, he made B $44. All right, so number 8 says two farmers bought a truck. The first farmer paid 4/5 of the price of the truck, and the second paid the rest. If the first farmer paid $9,600 for his share of the truck, then what was the total price of the truck? So for this one, you're going to have to convert this word problem into an equation that you can then solve. And it's not that difficult to do. Um, we know the first farmer paid 4/5 of the price of the truck. So let's work on converting that into an equation that we can then solve. We know he paid 4/5, so we'll write down 4/5. In math, we always associate the word of with multiplication. So this is 4/5 times the price of the truck. Well, that's an unknown. We don't know how much this truck cost, so we can represent that with the letter variable x. And then we're told that uh, if the first farmer paid $9,600 for his truck, what was the total price of the truck? So we know this 4/5 times x is equal to $9,600. And by solving this equation for x, where X is the total price of the truck, we'll have our answer. So again, if we want, we can rewrite this to be 4/5 X equals 9,600. To get rid of this 4/5 in front of this X, we're going to multiply 4/5 by its reciprocal, notably by 5/4. And of course, we're going to do that to both sides of this equation. In doing so, this crosses out over here, leaving you with X on this side. Now we have to work this out. 9,600 times 5/4. Again, we're multiplying a whole number by a fraction. So if you want, you can proceed by placing 9,600 over 1. And ideally, you would want to cross reduce this so that this math becomes a little bit easier to do. And to cross reduce this, I hope that 9,600 is divisible by 4. Let's see if it is. 9,600 divided by 4. How many times does 4 go into 9 without going over? Of course, that's 2 times, given that 4 times 2 is 8. 9 minus 8 is 1. Drop down this 6. We do know that 4 goes into 16. And since we just have these zeros here, we can go ahead and drop them down. How many times does 4 go into 16? Well, that's 4 times. Therefore, 4 goes into 1600 400 times. So 4 times 400 is 1600 with no remainder. So now that I've done that, I can actually cross reduce this multiplication problem. I can say 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into 9,600 2,400 times. Now this math is much easier to do. We have 2,400 over 1 times 5/1. Well, what is 2,400 divided by 1? 2,400 divided by 1 is just 2,400. So this is 2,400 times. What is 5 divided by 1? 5 divided by 1 is just 5. So now to figure out what the original price of the truck or the total price of the truck was, we're going to do 2,400 times 5. And of course, you can do that math off to the side if you'd like. 5 times 0 is 0, 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 4 is 20, so bring down a 0, carry a 2. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. So we can see that the actual or total price of this truck was B, $12,000. All right, so number 9 says the pet store had 6 parrots selling for $75 each and 12 hamsters selling for $25 each. Today, only 2 parrots and 6 hamsters were left in the store. In terms of dollars, what was the ratio of sales of parrots to hamsters? All right, so let's think about what we're doing for this problem before we get started. We know we're going to be expressing something as a ratio, and ratios more often than not have this word to in them. That is to say, we compare something to something else. Well, in this case, we want to compare the dollar amount of sales of parrots, according to this problem, to the dollar amount of sales of hamsters. And believe it or not, that's pretty easy to do. The first thing we have to figure out is how many parrots were sold. Well, we're told that the store had 6 parrots, and today it has 2. So that means 4 were sold, and we know they cost $75 each. Let's do the same thing for hamsters. We know that the store had 12 hamsters and only 6 are left. So that means 6 were sold and they cost $25 each. So by doing this math, we'll have the ratio of sales of parrots to hamsters. And of course, it will be expressed in terms of dollars. So let's work this out. If you want, you can do this math off to the side. We have 75 times 4, of course. 5 times 4 is 20. Bring down a 0, carry a 2. 4 times 7 is 28, plus 2 is 30. So $300 worth of parrots were sold. Let's figure out how many dollars worth of hamsters were sold. That's going to be 25 times 6. 6 times 5 is 30, so bring down a 0, carry a 3. 2 times 6 is 12, plus 3 is 15. So $150 worth of hamsters were sold. Well, one thing you can do to make this ratio a little bit easier to see is cross out some corresponding zeros. So in doing so, you're left with $30 worth of parrots were sold to every $15 worth of hamsters that were sold. And of course, you can reduce this even further. You should know that both 30 and 15 are divisible by a common factor of 15. 30 divided by 15 is 2. So $2 worth of parrots were sold for every 15 divided by 15 is 1. $1 worth of hamsters were sold. So the ratio of sales in terms of dollars of parrots to hamsters is B 2 to 1. All right, so number 10 says a farmer wants to plant a garden that has 4 times the area of his current garden. Since his current garden is in the shape of a square, he wants his new garden to also be in the shape of a square. His current garden has a perimeter of 100 feet. Then how many square feet will his new garden be? So in short, this is what we're being asked to figure out. We know this farmer has a small garden and he wants to plant a new garden that has 4 times the area of his smaller garden. And we know both gardens are going to be in the shapes of squares. In other words, all the sides are going to be equal. So this side's equal to that side's equal to that side, and that side's equal to that side. That's the same thing for this garden as well. In addition, we were told that the small garden has a perimeter of 100 feet. So clearly, to find the area of this larger garden, we're first going to have to find the area of this smaller garden. Well, we only know its perimeter. That said, from the previous problems in this video, you should know that if you know the perimeter of a square, you can find its area since you use the side length of a square to determine both of those. More specifically, to find the perimeter of a square, you simply add up all of its sides. So that would be S plus S plus S plus S, which we can combine just to be 4S. Again, for the ASVAB, you have to memorize those two formulas. But in this case, we know P is 100, so we can plug in 100 for P. This becomes 100 equals 4S. To get S by itself, we'll divide both sides by 4. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with S on this side. 100 divided by 4 is 25. So this smaller square has side lengths that are 25 feet. How do we find the area of this smaller square? Well, the formula to find area of a square is side times side. We now know that S is 25, so this is area equals 25 times 25. And I'm going to work that off to the side so as not to make any mistakes. 25 times 25. 5 times 5 is 25, so bring down a 5, carry a 2. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. Bring a 0 placeholder before we start multiplication with this 2. 2 times 5 is 10, carry a 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 5 plus 0 is 5. 2 plus 0 is 2. 1 plus 5 is 6. So our small garden has an area of 625 square feet. We know that the larger garden, according to this problem, has an area that is 4 times the area of the small garden. So to find this area, we're going to take 625 and we're going to multiply it by 4. 5 times 4 is 20, so bring down a 0, carry a 2. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 2 is 10. Bring down a 0, carry a 1. 4 times 6 is 24, plus 1 is 25. So the area of this larger garden is 2,500 square feet, which we can see is answer choice B. So number 11 says the price of spring water at Disney World is $9 per bottle. This is 375% of the cost of the same bottle of spring water at a supermarket. Given this, how much does the same bottle of water cost at a supermarket? All right, so for this one, we're going to have to translate this word problem into an equation that we can then solve. And let's work on doing that. We know a bottle of spring water at Disney World costs $9. So let's start by writing that down. We're told that this is, well, in math, we always associate the word is with equal. So $9 is or equals 375%. Well, as we've seen in this video already, we're going to be expressing percents in decimal form. The decimal equivalent of 375% is 3.75. So again, that becomes $9 is or equals 3.75. We always associate of with multiplication in math. So of multiply the cost of the same bottle of water at a supermarket. Well, that's an unknown value. And in math, we can represent unknown values with letter variables. I'm going to represent the cost of that bottle of water with the letter variable C. All right, so we just translated this word problem into an equation that we can then solve. And this says $9 equals 3.75 times C, or just 3.75 C. So clearly, we're going to be solving this equation for C, which means we're going to divide both sides of the equation by 3.75. In doing so, this crosses out here, leaving you with just C on this side. And to find the cost of the bottle of water in the supermarket, we have to do 9 divided by 3.75. And I'm going to do that off to the side. Again, this fraction says 9 divided by 3.75. In this case, we are dividing two decimals. That said, we have a decimal outside this division bar, which means we're going to have to take that decimal and shift it 2 times to clear the decimal to make this 375. And at the same time, we're going to shift the decimal inside the division bracket a corresponding number of times, notably 2 times. So in other words, we're working this question out. 900 divided by 375. All right, so let's go ahead and start working on this. We start by asking ourselves, how many times does 375 go into 9? It doesn't. How many times does 375 go into 90? It doesn't. How many times does 375 go into 900 without going over? Well, 300 times 3 would be 900, which would be too big. So the maximum number of times 375 goes into 900 without going over is going to be 2 times. And let's work that off to the side. We have 375 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10, carry a 1. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 1 is 15, carry a 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So this is going to be minus 750. 0 minus 0 is 0. 0 minus 5 we can't do, so we're going to have to borrow. This becomes 8. This becomes 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. 8 minus 7 is 1. All right, so now the question is, how many times does 375 go into 150 without going over? It does not, so I have to add a decimal here and a couple of 0 placeholders. Once I add that decimal, I'm going to bring it up into my answer, and now I can drop down one of these zeros. And the question becomes this: how many times does 375 go into 1500 without going over? Well, let's think about that. What is 300 times 5? 300 times 5 would be 1500, so that would be too big. What is 300 times 4? 300 times 4 would be 1200, so that gets us very close. So I'm going to say 375 goes into 1500 a maximum number of 4 times, but we're going to work that off to the side to confirm it. 5 times 4 is 0, or 5 times 4 is 20, so bring down a 0, carry a 2. 7 times 4 is 28, 29, 30, bring down a 0, carry a 3. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 3 is 15. So 375 times 4 is 1500. 1500 minus 1500 is 0. So in other words, 9 divided by 375 is 2.4. So we know the cost of this water is going to be $2.40 at the supermarket. So the correct answer to this one is A. So number 12 says an older computer chip can write 100 gigabytes of data to the hard drive in 10 minutes. A new computer chip can write 500 gigabytes of data to the hard drive in 5 minutes. How many more gigabytes of data per minute can the new computer chip write to the hard drive than the older computer chip? All right, so for this one, we're given two rates that computer chips can work at. We're told that an older computer chip can write 100 gigabytes of data to the hard drive in 10 minutes, and a new computer drive can write 500 gigabytes of data to the hard drive in 5 minutes. We want to figure out how much more data per minute this new computer chip can write than this older computer chip. So the first thing we want to do is express the amount of work they can do in terms of minutes. Again, this one writes 100 gigabytes in 10 minutes. So in other words, by doing 100 divided by 10, we'll figure out how much work it does per minute. And this is actually pretty easy to do. We can cross out these corresponding zeros. 10 divided by 1 is 10. So this one writes 10 gigabytes of data to the hard drive every minute. What about this one? Well, what is 500 divided by 5? That is 100. So we know that this new computer chip can write 100 gigabytes of data to the hard drive every minute. Well, how much more work or how many more gigabytes does this new one write than this old one? That's going to be 100 minus 10, or simply 90 gigabytes per minute more of data. So the correct answer to this one is D, 90 gigabytes per minute more. So number 13 says on Saturday, you just hit the jackpot of $100,000 for the lottery. If you decided to keep $85,000 and give the rest to your family, what fraction of the total jackpot did you give to your family? Well, you should know that 100,000 minus the $85,000 that you kept for yourself is going to be $15,000 that you gave to your family. That said, if you couldn't do that mentally, you can always work it out the old fashioned way. And we could do 0 minus 0 is 0, 0 minus 0 is 0, 0 minus 0 is 0. 0 minus 5 we can't do, so we're going to have to borrow from the number to the left. That's also 0, so we're going to have to come all the way to this 1 and borrow. This becomes 0, this becomes 10, this becomes 9, this becomes 10. 10 minus 5 is 5, 9 minus 8 is 1. So you gave $15,000 to your family members. The question is this: what fraction of the total jackpot did you give to your family? Well, you gave $15,000 to them out of a total jackpot of 100,000. So clearly, by reducing this fraction, 15,000 over 100,000, we'll be able to get the correct answer here. And this isn't as hard to do as you would think. Again, you can cross out these corresponding zeros in your numerator and denominator, which reduces to this 15 over 100. You should also recognize that both 15 and 100 are divisible by a common factor of 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3, of course. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So what fraction of the jackpot did you give to your family? You gave 3/20ths of the jackpot to your family. So number 14 says, together a husband and wife earn $100,000 per year. If the husband earns 3 times as much as the wife, then how much does the wife earn per year? All right, so for this problem, the key is to translate this word problem into an equation that you can then solve. Well, let's work on doing that. We know that husband and wife earn a certain amount of money together. That said, we don't know how much they earn individually. So, in light of that, we can use some letter variables to represent those unknown values. Specifically, we know this. Let's say the wife earns X amount of dollars per year. Well, according to this problem, the husband earns 3 times as much as the wife. So if the wife makes X dollars per year, the husband makes 3X dollars per year. And together, or when we add them together, they make $100,000 per year. All right, so by solving this equation for X, we'll clearly know how much the wife makes. Again, this is the wife's earnings. And this is, let me make that a little better, the husband's earnings. All right, so let's solve this. X plus 3x is going to be 4x equals 100,000. Let's divide both sides by 4 now to get x by itself. X equals 100,000 divided by 4. Well, what is 100 divided by 4? 100 divided by 4 would be 25. Therefore, 100,000 divided by 4 is going to be 25,000. Again, this X corresponds to the wife's earnings, and that's what we were asked to figure out. So, in other words, we know the wife makes $25,000 per year. Number 15 says, due to customer demand, a storage company wants to design a new storage box that has twice the volume of its largest box. Right now, its largest box is 5 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 3 feet high. If its new box will have a height of 5 feet and a width of 4 feet, then how long is it? So for this problem, it's pretty obvious that we're comparing the volume of two boxes. We're comparing the volume of a storage company's largest box, as well as the volume of a box that it wants to design that has twice the volume of its current largest box. Well, how do you find the volume of a box? A box is nothing more than a rectangular prism. So to find the volume of a prism, it's length times width times height. And we're going to be doing that for both of our boxes here. All right. Well, we know all these values for our first box. According to the problem, we know the largest box has a length of 5 feet, so that's going to be 5, a width of 4 feet, and a height of 3 feet. So the volume of our first box is 5 times 4 times 3. Well, 5 times 4 is 20. 20 times 3 is 60. So we know the volume of this first box is 60 cubic feet. Well, what do we know about this box that this storage company wants to design? We know that it has twice the volume, it says that right here, it has twice the volume of this box. So if this box has a volume of 60 feet, then this box has a volume of 60 times 2 feet, or 120 feet, cubic feet. What's more, we're told this new box will have a height of 5 feet. So we know this H is 5, a width of 4 feet. So we know this W is going to be 4, and an unknown length. So in other words, we have to figure out how long this new box is going to be. And that's going to be pretty easy. As you can see, we have 120 equals L times 4 times 5. By solving for L, we'll know how long this new box is going to be. So let's go ahead and work on doing that. 4 times 5 is 20. So this is 20L equals 120. By dividing both sides by 20, we'll get L by itself. This is actually pretty easy to do mentally. We can cross out these corresponding zeros. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So the length of this new box is simply going to be 6 feet, which is answer choice A. All right, so number 16 says train A heads north at an average speed of 95 miles per hour, leaving its station at the precise moment as another train, train B, departs a different station, heading south at an average speed of 110 miles per hour. If these trains are inadvertently placed on the same track and start exactly 1,435 miles apart, how long will it be until they collide? All right, so for this problem, it might be helpful to visualize what's going on. Okay, we know we have two trains heading toward each other, albeit from different stations. We know that we have train A starting in the south and heading north at a rate of 95 miles per hour. We know train B starts in the north and heads south toward train A at a speed of 110 miles per hour. We know that the total distance between these two trains is 1,435 miles, and we want to know how long it will take for them to collide. somewhere here in the middle. Well, you should recognize that this problem includes all the elements of the distance formula. Again, the distance formula describes the relationship between distance, rate, and time. Specifically, it says distance is equal to rate times time. Well, what do we have in this case? We know the total distance that these two trains have to cover is 1435. So that's going to be our distance. We want to know how long it's going to take before they collide. So that's in reference to time, and that's unknown. So we're going to leave that as t. Well, normally we have one object covering a distance in order to use the distance, rate, and time formula. In this case, we have two objects traveling toward each other. So in other words, they're covering the same 1,435 miles, but they're going to be doing it at a combined rate. So to find our rate here, I'm actually going to split this apart like this. R1 plus R2 to refer to the two rates of these trains. And that's going to be 1435 equals, let's call R1 110. Let's call R2 95 times t. So by solving the distance formula for t now, we'll know how long it will take them to collide. The first thing we have to do is combine the two rates of these trains. So that's going to be 110 plus 95. 0 plus 5 is 5. 9 plus 1 is 10, so carry a 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. So they're going at a combined rate of 205 miles per hour. That's 205 t equals 1435. By dividing both sides by 205 now, we'll be able to solve for t. This crosses out here, leaving you with t on this side. And now we have to do this math right here. And I'm going to do this off to the side. Again, you can read all fractions as long division. So I can read this as 1435 divided by 205. We start this long division by asking ourselves, how many times does 205 go into 1? It doesn't. How many times does 205 go into 14? It doesn't. How many times does 205 go into 143? It doesn't. How many times does 205 go into 1435 without going over? Well, 200 times 7 would be 1400. I'm going to say this is going to be fairly close to 7 times. And to confirm that, let's do the math off to the side. 205 times 7. 5 times 7 is 35, so bring down a 5, carry a 3. 7 times 0 is 0, plus 3 is 3. 2 times 7 is 14. So we can see that 205 times 7 is exactly 1435. 1435 minus 1435 is 0. So t in this case is going to be 7. In other words, it will take these trains 7 hours to collide if they're mistakenly placed on the same track. And one travels at 110 miles per hour and the other travels at 95 miles per hour. All right, so that is it for this video. As always, I hope you found it helpful, and as usual, you're more than welcome to leave feedback in the comment section below. If you want to help my channel out, you can do one of two things. One, you can subscribe to it, of course, and two, you can also share links to my videos, including this video, on social media, including on Facebook and Twitter. If you need more practice, for the ASVAB, please check out my free Math Bootcamp playlist. Again, that playlist has more than 500 practice test questions, and if you go through it from start to finish, we'll be exceptionally well prepared for either the ASVAB or PiCAT. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and cut you loose.